Welcome, Becky, to the Leaders Who Care series. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. What a pleasure. What an honor for me to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I think it's going to be everybody's pleasure to learn about the amazing stuff that you're doing and the difference that you're making. So let's start by if you could introduce who you are. We'll get to the real core of this in a minute, but where you're from, where you're living now, a little bit about family, something you've never told anybody ever that you just want to reveal now, stuff like that.
World, yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Uh, so, Mark, I am the mother of 10 children. I am the grandmother of 23 children.
Boy, what a
Uh,
slacker.
seriously, happily married. In fact, next month is our 50th wedding anniversary.
Wow, way to
That
go.
mile, yeah. And I'm just kind of driven to make a difference in the world by trying to help the least advantaged. Grew up in Salt Lake City, studied in North Carolina at Queens College, and played in the symphony there. I'm a violinist, and then got this bug to do something meaningful, and so here I am.
No, that's amazing. Can you name all your kids in or by order of age?
Yes, I can.
Good.
On a given
Backward,
day, absolutely.
either way, chronologically or the other
Yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah. And the ones that stand out there most are the ones that are misbehaving that day, right?
No, right. Do you, I know parents did this. I find I did it too. Do you sometimes have to go through all of them till you get
Yeah,
to
yeah,
yeah, the
yeah, yeah,
name, till you get
yeah.
to the one you want, right?
Final list at my house.
Right. Well, that's actually quite amazing. That you got 10. Congratulations. Congratulations on 50 years. That's really amazing. Um,
Not as many people anymore get there as there used to be.
yeah, no, that's fantastic. And the difference you make, with even your own kids, I'm sure is fantastic. So way to go. Um, so speaking of kids, then what were you like as a kid or a teenager?
Well, I'm pretty boring, actually. I had a happy childhood. I had great parents. I was determined to be a violinist, and so I spent hours and hours practicing every day. And my goal was to be in a symphony and then finally to be a soloist. And and I had tons of support. My dad was the French horn player in the Utah Symphony.
Wow.
And so, it's I just grew up with music being a big thing. But I have to say that having children was the biggest thing that I think defined my growth as a person. It gave me a different perspective. Um, and there are some defining events in my life that as I look back, I'd have to say probably the biggest one was the death of my oldest daughter. That's what prompted me to go to India in the first place, where I witnessed things that changed my life.
Yeah, it's a sad story, in a way, but I guess things happen for a reason, and they say, and so on. Did you want to be a violinist? Was it because of all the music around that you just decided to have an instrument, and then how did you pick violin?
Well, at my house, everyone knew that they would play an instrument because of my father's, commitment to music. And I just thought the violin was the most like the human voice. And I have a terrible singing voice. And so I thought, okay, I'll do the violin. And that's what I did. Yeah, so it worked. Nothing too exciting, but that's how I got violin.
Well, it's pretty exciting. I didn't get as far as violin, but with my singing voice, they tried to get me to play the trumpet, so you can understand why. Um, when and if I'm in the car with my boys or whatnot, it's funny how I remember all the time the minute I started singing, the radio went on or louder, and I finally realized it was every time I started singing. Um, so, so you went to Queens College in Charlotte. How did you end up you're in Utah, who, by the way, just got an NHL team. I'm a big hockey fan.
Uh,
So it's just cool. And then how did you end up picking to go to school in Carolina?
Oh, I didn't really pick it. It kind of picked me. I went to a music camp in Sun Valley that was run by the conductor of the Charlotte Symphony. And it was a 7-week music camp. And at the end of the camp, he offered me a position in the symphony. And he
Oh,
said, I'll get you a scholarship to one of the colleges. I was already going to another college or signed up to go. This was after my senior year in high school. So I got home from the camp, put all my clothes in the laundry. He called. He said, I've got you a full ride scholarship to Queens College. They started last week. You need to be here tomorrow. So put my clothes back in my suitcase and took off for Queens College. And the funny thing is, at that point, Queens was all girl. I didn't know that. I got to the campus and did not know I was at an all girl college. And the girls that picked me up at the airport and took me to the campus were showing me around. I kept saying slow, like, where's the boys' dorms? And they're like, we don't have any. That's so funny. No, like, where are the boys' dorms? We really don't have any. So I will tell you, when I called home that night and told my daddy that I was at an all-girls school, he was quiet for a second. And then he said, well, Becky, that's just a testimony to me that the Lord still answers prayers.
All right,
There you
Dad.
go. There you go. So, but I
Wow.
went
And
out there
you
and I was just because I was able to study with this fabulous violinist I had met at who was the concert master there. And so it worked out to be really great.
and you have how many boys, how many girls?
I have 6 boys and 4 girls.
Aha. So you went a little on the heavier on the boys' side just to make up for it.
Oh, they're a little easier.
Okay, well, that's another story.
Oh, the girls are too emotional, but the boys are a little easier. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think I told you I got 3 boys, so that's what I know. But and the daughter-in-law came on later, but I didn't have to raise her. So no, that's amazing. Our firm, we founded it on the premise that leaders and their organizations, whether it's for nonprofit, social profit, as I call them, or whatever, they always do better when they're doing good at the same time. You clearly were an early leader in understanding this. Um, you oversaw what I'm looking at your background. I remember you oversaw American and Indian companies, um, working with them in aiding and achieving Rising Stars initiatives. Can you describe somewhat what some of those initiatives were or are? Was it from the start you wanted to work with individuals and families affected with leprosy in India, or was it something else and then you ended up with that? And last but not least, how did that happen? How did you pick that?
That's okay. My husband asks me that all the time. How did this happen? But yeah, why don't I start with that actually, because that explains what our initiatives are. Yeah, so my oldest daughter, Amber, was severely bipolar, and she struggled in and out of mental institutions for about 8 years. And then she gave up and she took her own life. She was in college at the time. When we went through her things, we found that she'd been sending part of the money we gave her for college every month to support an orphan in India. I think maybe because she suffered so much, she just had a tender spot, right, for people who suffered. So anyway, at her funeral, we just told people, instead of sending flowers, why don't you just send money to this little orphanage? And people were very generous. And enough money was sent in that this orphanage asked me to be on the board of directors. And I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to be on this board, maybe I need to go to India and see what I'm doing. So I went to India. When I got to India, I was shocked at what I found there. Every day, as we would go from our hotel to the orphanage and then back again on the streets of Chennai, oh my gosh, at every single stoplight, these beggars would just surround our car. But Mark, these were not ordinary beggars. These were beggars that were missing, or they had rotting hands and feet, or missing them entirely. They had open gaping wounds. Many of them had pus running down their arms. Some of them didn't have eyes. I just had never seen anything like it. I'll never forget, at one stoplight, a man thrust his hand in the window to beg with maggots crawling through his hand. And it was hard to look at him. It hurt to look at him. I
Right.
remember saying to our driver, who are these people? And he said, oh, those are the lepers. And I said, what are you talking about? There's no leprosy in the world anymore. He said, ha, we have millions in India. That was kind of surprising. When I got home, couldn't sleep. Those images just haunted me at night. And I just kept thinking, dang, millions of people live this way. Why doesn't somebody do something? Then one morning after a long night, I thought, well, duh, you're somebody, do something. So I called 3 of my friends who were also housewives. I dragged in my husband's secretary. We sat around my kitchen table and we formed Rising Star Outreach to serve people in India that were affected by leprosy. I have to tell you though, when my husband came home that night and I said to him, John, like, you're never going to believe what we did today. He
Mhm.
said, those are words that strike fear into my heart. But he said, what did you do today? And I told him, I said, my friends came over and we formed a charity and we're going to work with people in India that have leprosy. And he was just incredulous. He said, seriously, Becky? What do you know about leprosy, about medicine, about India, about running a business? What do you know about any of these things? What do you think you're going to do? And I said, well, obviously, I don't know a lot about any of those things, but we are going to do something. And I know we're going to need a license, right? That if people donate, they don't have to pay taxes. You're an attorney, you need to get us that license. Yeah, Becky, that's called a 501c3 license. And normally, when people ask the government for one, they have to tell them what they're going to do. I said, great, just tell them we're going to do something somewhere. That's how we started. Four housewives and a secretary. So we really
Well,
didn't know what to.
before you go on,
Yeah,
and I don't think this is dramatizing it. Your your daughter made a difference.
yeah. Yeah, her life has meaning, right?
Yeah,
And as we go on, I think you'll see how much meaning it actually ended up having, which was just a very healing thing for me.
right.
But at any rate, when we started, we didn't know what to do. We just started taking rice and beans to the leprosy colonies because they were clearly starving and they were thrilled to get them. But it didn't take us long to figure out that if we fed them today, we had to come back and feed them tomorrow, right? So we weren't really accomplishing much. And we had actually raised enough money to hire a doctor, but when we got to India, the doctors we tried to contact said, look, these people are untouchables. We can't touch them. If we touch them, then we'll become defiled and then we'll lose our whole practice. No one can come to us anymore. So we just started digging out these wounds ourselves, filling the holes with salt crystals, and then wrapping them in bandages. And that clearly wasn't a great program either. But then we met a woman, and this is where the initiatives come in. Her name was Padma Venkatraman, and she happened to be the daughter of the former president of India, President Ramaswamy Venkatraman. She had also been the permanent women's representative to the UN for 20 years, so she had all the experience that we did not have. And she was able to become like our guide and our mentor, right? She partnered with us. She became the chairman of our board. And I was excited when we first met her because I had heard that she was doing microfinance in the leprosy colonies. And so I asked her about it, and she just said, Becky, poverty is not just a lack of money. She said it's a lack of opportunity, of education, of respect, of morals. I mean, there's a million things that feed into it. She said you can't just treat one thing and expect you're going to solve the problem. She said I could give a woman a microloan and she could create a business, but if she's still beaten every night by her husband, how much better is her life really?
Right.
She said, you have to have a holistic approach. So she worked with us to create three main initiatives. And those are the three main things that we do. And the first thing had to be obviously medical care because they were in such a terrible state. And so with her help, we were able to find doctors from the UN. We started a series of mobile medical units that would go from one colony to another each week and treat the patients in those colonies. But after we had been going for a while, we it was costing us a lot of money. I went to India. I've been to India now, Mark, by the way, 69 times.
Whoa.
But I would come back and I would see these wounds and I'd say to the doctor, man, we're paying you all this money. How come these wounds aren't healing? And he'd say, you know what, Becky, the patients never do anything I ask them to do. And I just thought, are you kidding me? Why don't they? And he said, well, why don't you ask Padma? So I did. Padma, why don't the patients do what the doctor says? And she was quiet for a minute. And then she said, you Americans, she said, you come to India and you just give things away. She said, I know it probably makes you feel good, but she said, every time you give something to someone, you diminish that person. You're
Mm,
really only making them beggars to you. And she said, besides, nothing given free has any value. She said, if you really want to lift these people, make them responsible for their own well being and just make it possible for them to do what they need to do. You need to charge them for this medical care. And I said, well, they haven't got any money. She said, just charge them 2 rupees. It's like 1.5 cents in American money. She said, they'll think they're paying for their medical care and watch what happens. So sure enough, we started charging them, 2 rupees to see the doctor. And suddenly those wounds started healing up because they started doing what the doctor said. For me, that was just like
mhm.
a light going off. I thought,
Yeah.
okay, never again are we going to give anything for free. Right. it, from now on, we just need to tap into the ability that people have to care for themselves and empower them to do what they need to have done. So that was something that we started with. We now have several mobile clinics. So Mark, this year, our dedicated doctors will give 57,000 medical treatments. And that will include life-giving surgeries, prosthetics, even limb reconstructions. And that's possible because we've made partnerships with different hospitals that give us now the surgeries for free. So that's kind of the medical program. That's our first initiative. The second one is economic self-reliance, because when we meet these people, they're all begging on the streets. So we would love to do microfinance, but there's not a single bank in India that will give a loan to a person with leprosy. And so we had to create micro savings groups. And so what that way that worked is we would have like 5 women in a colony, and we'd start a little bank, and they would each put in 10 rupees a month out of their begging money, like, I don't know, less than 10 cents. But to them, it was a lot of money. And so when they got enough money to make the first loan, like maybe $5 for an iron or something, one of the women would take that money, she would buy an iron, and she would start an ironing business. But since it was the women's begging money, there was a huge pressure to repay it. When she repaid it, then the next woman took the loan and she started a business. And before long, those 5 women had more money than anyone in the colony, as our average micro business. Well, let me go to the average beggar. The average beggar at that time was making about $20 a month on the streets. This was 2001. But our average micro business was making $100 to $300 a month. So then all the men wanted to come join, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
Together. But those 5 women always controlled the lending in that colony. So Pam, I taught the women, if a man comes for a loan that brutally beats his wife, no loans till the beatings have stopped. Or she said, if a man comes for a loan that has raped several girls in the colony, which unfortunately is very common, again, no loans until the rapes have stopped. So
Is that a
really,
rule? Starting to, is that a rule that the 5 women
yes,
took? Wow.
yes.
Wow.
Really, for the first time in history, right? These women are taking charge of their lives in ways they've never been able to do before. And
Wow.
it's really been a remarkable thing to see. So, Hadma works with the government to get get the government to donate the land that they're squatting on so that they can have farms. We divide it into family plots. They all get a plot. We bring in adaptive tools. We teach them how to farm. And now they're growing their own food instead of begging on the streets. And they're really proud. Um, we start a husbandry project in every colony, goats or pigs or chickens or whatever. And so that's a big deal too. So that was the second initiative. The third one is education. Um, the the people that have leprosy use their kids as beggars on the streets for the simple fact that people tend to give more to kids that beg than they do to adults, right? So we thought if we're going to stop leprosy, we've got to do it at this new generation. So we got to get them off the streets. We got to get a school going. So we started our first little school was in a rented house on East Coast Road. It had room for 27 children on one mat. There was one bedroom. We put one mat out. 27 kids slept on that same mat. And hope you can find that picture. Anyway, and then but the day we opened that registration, we had hundreds of kids coming in from all over India. When word got out on the grapevine of the streets that there was a school in India that would accept children from leprosy families, then hundreds came. They came from all over India. So we tried to open up another little children's home. This is just a preschool, again, ages 3 to 5 with 20 spaces. But again, it wasn't even touching the list of kids we had that wanted to get in. So we finally bought 16 acres of land and built our first campus. And now we have 1,100 children that we're educating. So that's kind of the education program. We then started a little preschool in Bihar right before the pandemic with 30 kids. It now has 118. They're begging for a campus. And we are just completing a campus in Bihar, which is the poorest state of India, for 700 students. And that will be completed and dedicated in January. So that's what we do for education.
And that's what your daughter did, and you did it with her. I mean, you always hear things happen for a reason. You always hear, and she for whatever reason she was donating that money, it was for something, right? I have chills when I actually say that because I think it didn't just happen by accident that she did that. I mean, great for her. I mean, and for you for then
Well,
making
I
that
have to
happen.
just tell you one thing about that because you and I have a bit of the same response, but um, our schools have to be boarding schools because the leprosy colonies are so spread out and the kids are not welcome on public transport. So they can't come and go every day. So they have to live at the campus. And so at our first campus, the dorms were built by the Marriott Corporation. And so they got to name them. And they named the little boys' dorm the Bill and Dick Marriott Home for Boys. And they named the girls' dorm the Amber Douglas Home for Girls after my daughter who died. And I just have to tell you, Mark, every time I go to India and I see that dorm with her picture and her name on it, I get chills clear down to my toenails, right? I just think of, over the years, more than 1,000 girls will go through that dorm and their lives will be vastly different because they got an education. And then one day those girls will get married and have children of their own, and their lives will be completely different because their mothers lived in that dorm. And then those girls will, have a family and their kids' lives will be different because their grandmothers lived in that dorm. So it just quickly becomes generational. And it's a very healing thing for me to go and
Sure.
see that picture and that name on that dorm.
No, it's spectacular. There's programs that are called "You Are Enough," and then where um, people don't feel enough if they don't become Oprah Winfrey or they don't become this and that, or whatever. But you are enough just by what your daughter did. Just look what she got. Look what happened because she did that.
Yeah.
It could have been any country. It could have been for the thing down the street, but she did it there for that. I mean, it blows me away. And the other thing that blows me away, and I see this all the time, is or this expression, who knows how many Einsteins are in those kids, right? Who knows who's going to have the cure to this? Or who knows just who's going to do something small that just is great too, um, just because of that. And
Kind of fun. I'll just throw this statistic out. More than 95% of our graduates go to college. And because we partnered with Harvard, and Harvard sent us 4 World Teach teachers to teach our Indian teachers how to teach critical thinking and problem solving instead of rote memory like the rest of India was doing at the time. And so our kids have done extremely well. And so we now have graduates in medical school and engineering colleges and law school. I mean, they are doing fantastic. And yeah, I mean, anything is possible, right? There are geniuses in the midst of all those kids.
yeah, absolutely. And even if they're not genius, they're beautiful and brilliant in their own way.
Yeah.
And they make a difference out there. And because most people wouldn't. Yeah, but unfortunately, most people wouldn't go to do that something in a leprosy camp for those reasons. I do remember seeing when you showed, and we'll try to get some of these photos in this presentation, when you showed the young women grown up, the kids, and I saw, and it's like, wow, it's spectacular, and they were getting great jobs and doing great things themselves.
Yeah. Um, One of our favorite stories to tell is the story of little Jennifer.
I was going to
Jennifer,
ask you that, so go for it.
I'll go for it. When she was just a little toddler, her mother, who has some emotional issues, was overwhelmed at the idea of raising a child in a leprosy colony. And one day she just took Jennifer and threw her on this big pile of trash. They have these huge trash heaps in India, sometimes as high as 7 stories. And so she threw her on this pile and she says, "You can never come home." So this little tiny child, and of course, the trash heaps are where the dogs of India feed. And so all these dogs came snarling around, and poor little Jennifer was screaming and terrified. And it just so happened that her grandfather was coming home from begging in the city, and he heard this child screaming and the dog snarling. And even though he doesn't have any feet, he managed to climb to the top of this trash heap, and there he found his granddaughter. And he took her to his house and he ended up raising her. When she turned 5, he brought her to Rising Star Outreach to our little school and gave her to us. And anyway, she's just now graduated from medical school with a degree as a nurse anesthetist. And so now she's able to help heal other people. And I love that, right? This little child thrown away on a pile of stinking, rotting trash that's now helping to heal others, which is just it's a fun thing. And Mark, I have to tell you, every child has a story. You think you've heard something you could just can hardly believe, and then you talk to the next child. And it's remarkable what where they've come from, what they've done. I mean, we had two little kids come in, a little boy and his sister. They were about 4 and 5 years old. The little boy had scorch marks on his hand. The father had doused their mother with cooking oil and lit her on fire. And the little boy, of course, tried to put her out and was had scorch marks on his hands. You can imagine how traumatized they were that they came in and we we hooked him up with some volunteers and with some loving house mothers, and they have just flourished. They're doing fantastic. But again, you just the stories, in America, we don't hear these stories. We don't realize that little children go through these kinds of traumas. But that's what we deal with every day.
Yeah, and it should always teach us that we judge people way too quickly by how they look or this or that or whatever. And the heart and soul and the future and whatever potential is in that kid is incredible. And so way to go for that. And I think the kids probably those kids there appreciated more than we could ever even understand um themselves, where they are and what they're doing. And it blows me away. As you can tell, it blows
It's,
me away.
it was funny what you said because Padma has a saying. She is always saying to us, when we can see people by their potential instead of by their challenges, she said, then I think we begin to see them as God sees them. Now she's Hindu, right? But I just thought that was such a beautiful thing. And she said, to God, they're all his children. And he knows what their potential is. They really just need opportunity and support and care, and they can become amazing. I mean, we have our dance troupe, for example, was trained by Sean Perry from Broadway, the guy that played Tarzan on Broadway,
Well,
by Stacy Tukey, the judge from So You Think You Can Dance. And they're fantastic. And they've just now won an international dance competition. We have one girl that's won, she's the top dancer in the world in Bharatanatyam dance now. I mean, like, they have as much talent as you and I have. They just need a chance to develop
they
it.
probably have more talent than me, certainly dancing. For sure.
I don't need to when it comes to dance. But
But
no,
it's
they all have a story, and it's just so fun to see what's possible and how little it takes to take a child that has no future and give them a life, and how rewarding that is, not just for us but for the world, right? And it's good for India. I mean, they become productive citizens, they become people that have things to offer back to their country. So it's good.
and it's a message. It's a message for everyone. It's a message for giving people a second chance. It's a message for someone who's skinny, fat, this or that. Even as simple as that. That inside they're just dying to belong. I mean, one thing that comes up for blue zones, for example, is they found that the thing that fills people's hearts and souls more than anything is belonging. And once you belong, the sky's there's no limit. Forget the sky's the limit. There's no limit to moving forward. So yeah, it's incredible. I wanted to ask you a question about, as a woman, did you find more challenges, more issues, more whatever, as a woman going through all that?
Well, India's an interesting place for women.
It is. That's why I asked.
They don't have a lot of rights, and so it's difficult for an American having American ideas of what women are capable of, going to India and working there. In fact, even to register Rising Star Outreach, I had to sign my name writing by hand 14 times. I, Rebecca Peterson Douglas, daughter of Don C. Peterson, wife of John Lewis Douglas, because my only standing was as a daughter and a wife, right? It was as by the men I was connected to. And so that was really kind of interesting. But, an interesting thing has happened at the school, which is, I think you'll find fascinating. We started our school just K through 5 because the kids had They couldn't read or write their own name in any language. They've been begging on the streets, right? They weren't even toilet trained. They've been peeing on the streets while they were dodging cars. But when they came in, since they had never been to school, we only took grades K through 5 initially. And then every year, we couldn't bring older kids in because they would be so far behind. So we would just bring in a new kindergarten class and bump everybody up one year. Well, the year that our oldest class was in finally got up to the 8th grade. When they went home that summer for summer vacation, they get 1 month of summer vacation, the month of May, because it's so hot in India. They come back to school June 1st. Well, that June 1st, none of our 9th grade girls came back, not one. And we said, where's our girls? So we went into the leprosy colonies to find them, and they had all been married off, like to their 40-year-old uncles. We were just so heartsick because they were really just going into a life of servitude, and we'd had them for all these years. We were in love with them. We had so many dreams for them. They had dreams for themselves. And I said to Padma, this is not okay. We can't keep doing this. We got to figure this one out. And so she thought for a minute, and then she said, okay, she said, let's charge tuition. And I said, what? She said, yeah, let's charge tuition. I said, okay, Padma, you want to charge tuition? You can tell the patients. I'm not going to tell them because they're not educated. And so they don't run on a logical framework. They run on an emotional framework. And it's very easy for mobs to develop. We've had several mobs come against us in India. And she said, okay. So she came down the next parents' day. Once a month, all the parents come and spend the whole day with their kids because we want to keep those family bonds strong. So
Mhm.
the next parents' day, when the parents came, Padma went to them and she said, okay, we've given you all this free education for all these years. Now, she said, starting next year, you're going to have to pay tuition, and it will be 1,000 rupees, which is like $10. And they were just like, what? We can't pay that. Look at it. We have no hands. We have no feet. We have no eyes. How can you make us pay tuition? She said, no, no, no. You all have a business, which is true. When we opened the school, Padma insisted that every parent that brought a kid to our school had to take out a microfinance loan. So, and start a little business because she said, Becky, if they're still begging on the street and the kids graduate from high school, the kids won't respect their parents and you will have just destroyed a family.
Wow.
So every parent had a little business. And she said, you can just we'll open up a bank account for every child. You can just bring a few hundred, like 100 rupees if you want a month, and put in their bank account. And she said, if and when they graduate, you'll get it all back. Well, that meant that they could conceivably have up to 13,000 rupees if their children went through school and then graduated, which is more money than any of them have seen at any one time in their entire lives. So the next year, all of our 9th grade girls came back, and they've been back ever since. So that was like working with that female woman, kind of thing to try to figure out exactly how we could work within the beliefs of Indian culture. We want to honor their culture. We don't want to destroy it or turn them into Americans. And so that's kind of the challenge, is to find ways that we can equalize between the boys and the girls, opportunity and respect, and all those things. We had another little girl married that was forced by her father to get married when she was 14. She married a 40-year-old man. He was an alcoholic. He was very abusive. And she was immediately pregnant. But after a couple of years, she divorced him, which is unheard of. I
No
mean, she
kidding.
gained enough self-awareness or self-confidence that she was willing to go it on her own, which is in India is just not, that's not what you do in the villages. But she did, she divorced him. And now her 2 daughters are studying at Rising Star Outreach, one of our house mothers. And so she's living her dream through her 2 little girls, and she's still connected with Rising Star. So yeah, it's finding a way to work through these sometimes crazy social
Yeah, and then
war.
yeah, sometimes they're not even real. They're just made up in some of these villages. I've seen in other countries too, where like Tostan was an organization that was against mutilation, child woman cutting, and long story short, they had to let even the women wouldn't go against it because there was so much tradition. So they talked about hygiene all the time, and through that, the women started asking about it. And fast forward, they spoke to the the imams and whatnot, no one could find where it was written that they had to do this. It was just made
Yeah,
up probably by some guy, some creepy uncle or something. And
yeah, yeah.
and it changed. And like you said, generations are now going to contribute so much stuff, like her having the daughters, et cetera, et cetera. And
Yeah.
then it's yeah, it's not free, it's not the same as freedom, but we all have to stand up for what we know is right at some point for other
And
people
it's
too.
progress, right? That's the important thing is it's progress.
Right.
And it's teaching. And one thing we think about is like, so we've got, half boys and half girls, and all those boys are being raised to respect women and to respect them the same as they respect themselves. In fact, if we have a birthday cake, the girls get served first. If we have, I mean, the girls always go first, which is just, just drives the boys nuts. But they're learning, and hopefully, because that's who our girls are going to have to marry one day, right? Someone that will respect them the way that we've taught them to be respected.
We
So,
should maybe do some of that in the United States as well, a little bit more
yeah,
of that. Stuff.
we all countries have something to learn, right? We're all on a learning curve. One thing they love to point out to me in India is that very few people are divorced in India. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing because there's a lot of abuse going on. But that is something, right? Those families are staying intact. So we all have something to learn.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Even here, even equal rights amendment has taken forever to pass here. Still, for women and stuff. But one thing we say in LA is that we gotta leave them wanting more so we can do a sequel. So we'll definitely have to do a sequel here. But I do have one other question for this part, and I
Okay.
think it's going to be an easy question. A client told me in 2021, one client told me, he said, the year 2020 was the year that flew by slowly. And I said, what a great line. And, it feels like yesterday and years ago, the pandemic all at the same time.
Yeah.
But with everything that's gone on, we're already well into 2024. What are you most grateful for? And what are you most hopeful for?
Well, that's a good question. I, I would say that I'm grateful for the continued support of committed donors, a dedicated staff, an extraordinary team in India. We have 168 full-time employees that run our schools and
Wow.
run our programs. And at a time when technology and social media seem to be driving us apart into warring factions, a dedication to doing something good, I think, overcomes those obstacles and brings people together. During COVID, we couldn't hold school for 2 years. It was 2 years in India. It was 1 year in the States, but two in India, and because of the Delta variant that was so deadly there.
Oh, yeah.
But so we had to put tablets and hotspots into more than 100 leprosy colonies, almost 200. And we had hundreds of kids learning through remote learning, like in America. It was very different there because in every colony, we would only have a few kids in our school, but there'd be kids in other schools, and there'd be kids in no schools, but we're the only ones that had a tablet there. And so they would all come gather around and all watch from the same tablet. And then the parents started coming and standing in the background. And as the teachers would talk about things, the parents be writing in the dirt with sticks, trying to, because they wanted to learn how to read. They'd never learned how to read. And so, in a way, there were blessings, right, that came from
There
that
always are.
those those slow years. I would hope that we were told when we started this program that it couldn't be done, that you couldn't make beggars on the street into productive citizens who owned businesses, that you couldn't take those kids that were begging and put them into medical school or engineering colleges. It just can't be done. And we've done it. And so in 2024, my hope is we can now scale it across India. They say there's over 800 leprosy colonies in India. We work in 200 of them.
Wow.
We'd love to be in all 800
Why
with this
not?
program that gives kids and parents and people a chance to live with dignity and have a reason to wake up every morning. So that's kind of what I'm hoping that we can all learn that when we serve, when we give of ourselves, that we end up being the most blessed. I would have to say, Mark, that I'm probably the most healed of anyone that we've worked with in India as I've gone through the death of a daughter. So I think in 2024, if we can just quit bickering at each other and start reaching out to lift, I think that the whole world would be a little bit better.
I think the world would be a lot better, not even a little bit better. Amen, amen to that. Well, I'm super grateful for your daughter and you and both of you leaders who care and your family, and I'm sure they had to give you support on that also. And you've made me more hopeful just after this conversation. So way to go, because I'm a pretty hopeful person anyway, but you made me more hopeful. So thank you for all you do, and thank you for sharing all that.
Well, thank you. And thanks for your listeners for listening. And can I just throw out a website? Would that be all
Please.
right?
Yeah.
If anyone would like to come to India and work with us or would like to just get involved, it's easy. Our website is risingstar.outreach.org. The outreach is really critical because Rising Star is a porn site. Rising Star Outreach is our site. Okay.
I would love to keep score of who goes to which one, actually.
But anyway, if anybody would like to learn more and get involved, we'd sure love to. I know how to hook you up. Right.
Rising Star Outreach.
That's it.
Dot
.org.
org. All right. Thanks.
Thank you so much.